In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news and rumor updates for you from NHL clubs, including the New Jersey Devils, Chicago Blackhawks, Washington Capitals, Ottawa Senators, and the San Jose Sharks. We'll jump into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumor topics to discuss today, so let's jump right in. First of all, I want to talk about a trade rumor going from the Chicago Blackhawks, indicating that forward Brendan Perlini is very likely going to be moved. Now, this was discussed in the most recent edition of TSN Insider Trading, where insider Pierre LeBrun has basically indicated that the Hawks and Perlini both agreed, including his agent Darren Ferris, that a fresh start somewhere else might be best for the young forward. Now, of course, he was acquired in the Dylan Strome trade, but brought him to Chicago from the Arizona Coyotes. He was a fairly high draft pick a few years back, has shown a lot of potential, but he's yet to kind of realize that on a consistent basis so far in the NHL. He's only played in one NHL game so far this season. He had very limited minutes. I think it was only about 7 or 8 minutes that game. Hasn't really been in favor with the Hawks, so he's not really kind of in their long-term plans at this point. So hopefully sometime soon that can happen so he can resume playing and kind of move things on here in his career. I mean, talking about teams that are looking for forwards, let's segue into the next team we're going to look at, and that's the Ottawa Senators that we've discussed multiple times lately, that they're rumored to be looking to add 1 or 2 forwards, and with the recent injuries that we've seen to Anisimov and Colin White, that's likely going to accelerate things like that. And a young forward like Brendan Perlini, who's a fairly inexpensive contract, not long-term deal or anything like that, so it likely would be attractive to the Senators as well. And perhaps going to a team like Ottawa very well might help resuscitate his career, kind of like what we've seen with Anthony Duclair, who was picked up from the Columbus Blue Jackets last year, had a really strong finish to the year, and so far has gotten off to a pretty good start as well, and seems to be back on track, playing a bigger role for Ottawa, and they certainly were able to acquire a young forward who's, turning out to be a fairly important player for them so far. So we'll see about Perlini. We also seen a recent trade this offseason between the Hawks and the Senators, so you never know. Perhaps the Senators might be a team to look out for in regards to him, but apparently there are some other young forwards that the Senators have their eye on, including some with the Minnesota Wild organization. Of course, as we know, the Wilds have had a really bad start to the season. They're getting many calls that we've discussed on multiple occasions, and GM Bill Guerin's made it known that he's really trying to be patient here. He doesn't want to make a trade for the sake of making a deal or do anything emotionally driven. He's trying to make sure he does the right thing and try to get this team back on track. And of course, they're kind of handcuffed by a lot of long-term veteran contracts that are pretty tough or almost impossible in some cases to move. So unfortunately, they might have to move pieces that are a little bit younger, or perhaps some players that they may not want to, in order to kind of get some fresh players into the mix, and some young players that apparently are believed to be on the trade block, or at least potentially available if Guerin finds the right deal, including young guys like Joel Eriksson, Kevin Fiala, or possibly even Ryan Donato, according to Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun, who covers the Ottawa Senators, who indicated that those 3 forwards are believed to be potentially available, and their players that the Senators apparently do have some degree of interest in and are certainly keeping an eye on. So we'll see if we see any kind of deals between Ottawa and Minnesota. But those are all the type of players that make sense for the Senators. Like I said, somebody who's not on a long-term deal, relatively young, somebody who they might be able to get some good productivity out of, not cost a lot of money, or in terms of their contract or what it's going to take to acquire them. And we'll see what happens. But look out for the Senators. I do expect some trades to be taking place sooner than later. Now, in this edition of Insider Trading that I was referencing, they also talked about Taylor Hall here again, so some more updates, basically indicating that there really hasn't been a whole lot of progress or a whole lot of talking in regards to a new potential contract extension. Now, a few days ago, we discussed an article from Sportsnet talking about 3 potential landing spots for Taylor Hall should the Devils not be able to re-sign him. Those teams were the Montreal Canadiens, the Colorado Avalanche, and of course the Anaheim Ducks. And there really wasn't, like I said, any rumors linking those teams to Taylor Hall, or that they've had conversations or anything like that. They're just 3 teams that the author at Sportsnet felt made good sense from a financial perspective, a roster perspective, all that they would be able to have the assets necessary to make the acquisition, etc. And obviously, we'll see if that ever comes to that. But according to Pierre LeBrun, basically all's been quiet. His agent Darren Ferris is certainly not having a lot of conversations right now. His agent Darren Ferris and Ray Shero haven't really talked in a while, but he did indicate that Taylor Hall and Ray Shero have a pretty good relationship and have talked pretty regularly, almost on a daily basis here. But obviously with the Devils struggling, that certainly does not bode well for them to be able to re-sign their top player. We did see them recently extend forward Nico Hischier to a long-term deal. Of course, they got Jack Hughes in the mix and some other interesting pieces there that Taylor Hall likely would be very interested in playing with should he stick around. But at the same time, like I said, he really wants to win and be in a consistent playoff atmosphere, and we're not quite sure if the Devils can do that. Now, he did indicate that there is believed to be some meetings set up probably in early November for Hall's representative, Darren Ferris, to speak with Ray Shero and kind of start the process here again. But it looks as though Taylor Hall is nowhere near close being ready to make a decision whether or not to sign an extension or wait it out and potentially hit free agency. So I guess we'll stay tuned here on the Taylor Hall situation in New Jersey to see if we have any further updates on where his decision might be heading. Now, touching on the Washington Capitals here yet again, I know yesterday we talked about Braden Holtby and his potential contract situation where he's a pending UFA and hasn't really had a strong start to the year. He did play really well last night though in Edmonton. I did catch most of the Capitals and Oilers game. The Oilers did make quite a comeback, so he ultimately took the loss in the game in overtime, but essentially he had a really strong start. I felt one of his better ones of the year, but like I said, he had been being outperformed a lot by Ilya Samsonov during his time on the ice so far. But they also touched on not only Holtby, but Nicholas Backstrom as well. Those two big names for the Capitals that are pending unrestricted free agents. And they basically let it be known from GM Brian McClellan that ultimately he's met with their players and their agents very early on before the season started. And it seems as though they're very quite likely to be patient here and let this kind of play out possibly for the entire year. Kind of wait and see how each player performs, how the team does. Are they going to be in a run for, potential other long playoff run, potential Stanley Cup again? If they get to a situation where they had a really bad, second half of the year or something and they fell out of the playoff picture, well, things could possibly change. But like I said yesterday with Holtby, I really don't see them making a trade. I just don't really see Holtby sticking with the organization longer term because of their cap situation. On Backstrom case though, he's going to be 33 years old by the time the next contract would kick in. So I could see them probably looking to sign him maybe somewhere between 3, 4, maybe no more than 5 years, depending on what they need to do to get the average annual value in check here to make it work for the player and the roster to make sure for their cap situation. So we'll see. But ultimately, it looks as though both players likely ride out the rest of their contract here, and we probably won't see either player sign either with the Capitals or elsewhere until we get to the early stages of next offseason. Now, there's also another article from Kevin Kurz of The Athletic talking about the Sharks and the possibility of trading a defenseman. Of course, we had talked about a week or so ago about the possibility of the Habs showing interest in Marc-Andre Vlasic. Of course, he's from the area, a whole local player who might be interested in going back to play for his hometown team. But of course, he does have a full no-trade clause, so he has full control over whether or not that it would happen if the Sharks decided they were interested in making that kind of move. In his latest article, it's like a mailbag type of article where he was taking questions from fans. And the question in the mailbag was that should they trade Vlasic or even possibly Brendan Dillon? Basically, he said Brendan Dillon's been their most consistent defenseman so far this year. He said he doesn't see the Sharks trading Dillon unless they were to fall out of the playoffs, and it was looking by the deadline that they were not going to be a playoff team. Then perhaps they would make a move at that point. Otherwise, he sees them hanging on to him. As far as Vlasic goes, there's certainly some question marks whether or not they should consider that. He hasn't had a great start to the season. He has a lot of term left on his contract, fairly expensive as well. So certainly would be a tough deal to move, but maybe a fresh start would get him going again. Maybe the Habs would be interested. There was a lot of reports of the Habs scouting the Sharks quite closely earlier, which has kind of fueled all this speculation. So I guess we'll see. But according to Kevin Kurz, he doesn't see Dillon going anywhere. He did feel that it is possible the Sharks could explore a Vlasic trade if they decide they need help more so in other areas. But obviously because of that contract and no trade clause certainly complicates things. And at this point as well, we don't have any further updates to suggest that the Habs have really increased their interest or anything of that nature. So I guess we will see what happens in San Jose. But obviously right now they're near the bottom of the Pacific Division. So until they get things further up the standings here, it's certainly going to be a lot of speculation around potential moves in San Jose. Now, we also have some young players to keep our eye on who may or may not stick in the NHL, but at this point, it looks as though all three of these players very well might. But I know Team Canada executives are certainly watching these situations closely to see, even if they don't return to junior, if they might be able to be loaned to Team Canada for the World Junior Championships. And that includes Kirby Dach of the Chicago Blackhawks, Barrett Hayton of the Arizona Coyotes, as well as Noah Dobson of the New York Islanders. Now, all three of these players would certainly be really top players for Team Canada should they be released and loaned to the team in order to go play in the World Junior Championships this Christmas. But at this point, none of those teams appear ready to send them back to junior. It is quite likely that all three are going to be sticking with their NHL clubs, even if they're not playing on a consistent basis. Like all three of them really are not playing on a regular, every game-by-game basis right now. But it is certainly possible as the season goes on that they kind of ramp up how much they're playing, and if they play well, and depending on what what else happens with their team and their rosters, injuries and all that their roles could very well be increased as things go. So it's also going to depend if these teams are in a playoff picture or not. Obviously, if some of these teams are not looking like they're going to be playoff teams come Christmas time, they might not mind having these guys be loaned out to go get some great experience and potentially win a gold medal for their country at the World Juniors and play big roles. That certainly would be nice for them to be able to do. So I guess we'll see here if these players end up sticking in the NHL, going back to junior, or if they do make it to the World Junior Championships to help Team Canada possibly have a stronger team. That is all your news updates for today. Of course, as always, want to know what your thoughts are on everything we discussed in today's video. So make sure you leave some comments down below and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.